You know, usually when people plan little trips out or what have you, they prepare. They prepare financially, they prepare with a suitcase, pack some clothes, pack some gear or whatever, get all their shoes, whatever they're gonna wear for weeks at a time or whatnot, especially for big trips, and prepare financially, for the cost of the trips and the cost of food, cost of whatever you're gonna be spending, wherever it is you're going to be spending, and that's all good and all, but somewhere along the lines, I kind of had a small trip in mind with not a lot of money at all. Basically one little idea just turned into massive fucking adventure. I can't even begin to tell you how it was that I came up with it, because I didn't. It was just something that spontaneously that I decided to just, slightly stray from my original plan, and then it ended up like slowly but surely. Actually, not even slowly, like it happened all so fast. It was incredible. I guess I just want to share that story with you guys today, along with a friend of mine that you guys are going to meet. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to sit down with him as long as I would have liked to, and you guys will definitely hear from him again in the future. I promise, because there's so much I want to talk to this guy about. It's not even funny. And so on that note, I just want to share with you guys about my trip across Canada. Yeah, across Canada. Like, I'm not even bullshitting you. Like, pretty close to 5,000 kilometers of the majority of it was basically, hitchhiking in the middle of winter, and not in the middle of winter, but like it was already pretty chilly, and a good chunk of my trip was like walking in like a snowy highway. So I started from Vancouver because I was already living in Vancouver with the thought in mind that I was gonna go to Calgary. And so sure enough, I bought myself a $60 ticket for Greyhound. I was gonna go for a weekend to Calgary, go see some friends, and I don't know what it was that the whole 16-hour or 17-hour trip, whatever it was, must have been. I was just thinking to myself, how cool would it be to go on an adventure, to just go to wherever the world takes me, and if I don't know anybody, wherever I'm going, just meet some new people or whatever, and just dwelling on that idea, take into consideration that I didn't take a lot with me. It was just like a small, like a backpack-sized traveling bag, with a change of shoes, just a secondary pair of pants, a couple of shirts, and the jacket I had on. Very limited stuff, casual trip stuff, like not really intending for it to be anything big. And so I get to Calgary. I'm supposed to get off the bus just before it's supposed to take off there. For whatever the reason was, that I was scared to get caught and get in trouble or whatever and get stuck in the middle of nowhere. But at the same time, my curiosity and my need for something new and something adventurous at the time, like, I guess overmatched the feeling of not wanting to do anything stupid. So I stayed on the bus, and the Greyhound ended up heading North Alberta. It was supposed to pass pretty close to the town of Edmonton, which is where my parents live. Ended up stopping at a town that's pretty close to there called Stony Plain. I knew the town fairly well, but I didn't really know much of anyone there. Unfortunately, I got off to grab myself a bottle of water, and by the time I came back, the guy knew what I had done, and he made me stay there. He didn't let me back on the bus. He just kind of gave me my stuff back and and left me there to fend for myself. That was all right. I didn't want to go to Edmonton because I knew like that's where my journey would have ended if I stayed there. So I kind of hopped on the most obvious freeway, which is, in Alberta, they call it the Yellowhead Trail. It's a Trans-Canada Highway. Basically, it's one long ass road that runs from like one point of Canada to the far west point to the far east point, and like that'll, you go along that, you're able to see everything type deal. So I just started walking along that, trying to get picked up and whatever. And I was so scared the entire time that I was going to be walking and somebody I knew was going to see me, since I ended up walking basically across Edmonton. But I didn't. I ended up making it to the next little town over, which is called Sherwood Park, which is on the east side of Edmonton. There, this guy in his pickup truck was on his way to a hunting trip. He had two big, huge dogs in the back seat, and he picks me up, and sure enough, I have this big ass dog like sniffing me in the air, trying to sniff me out, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, so where are you from? I'm telling him the story. He's like, oh shit, man, you're gonna need some stuff. So he grabs some stuff from his traveling kit and throws it into my bag. And he didn't take me very far. Must have taken me maybe only 30 kilometers east. And when he dropped me off, I was still in the middle of the highway. He was gonna venture far north, so he just kind of dropped me off before his next major turn. And so I kept walking, and it's getting pretty dark, and now we were nearing probably like 7:30. It's already winter, so naturally like the days are shorter, and it was already like fairly dark. And this guy Doug picks me up also in the pickup truck, was also going to go hunting, but he was headed further east. Doug, if you're listening, thanks bud. I was able to remember his name. Doug, yeah, he was a cool dude. He ended up driving me to this little town called Swift Current, which is already in Saskatchewan, pretty close to the town of Regina. He left me there in front of a motel, and I got a room for a night for really cheap. I think for like $40 or some odd shit. Take into consideration, I did not have a lot of money. I maybe had, my debit card with only like $300 in it at most. I got myself the room for the night and got up early the next morning, figured out what my route was going to be, and I just started walking. And I ended up walking a lot longer than I thought I would be. And trucks and cars would, zoom by on the freeway, but nobody would stop. To my surprise, I ended up making it like pretty close to the city of Regina, even though I never actually entered the town itself. As I'm getting pretty close, this dude who was driving a 18-wheeler, stopped at the side of the road. A good buddy of mine, Gerald, who, became friends with me as of that day, picked me up, and he was actually on his way to Winnipeg, which was where he lived. He was there after, doing a delivery or a transport trip for work or whatnot. He was gracious enough to take me to Winnipeg with him. Once I was riding with Gerald, he was asking me where I was going and, how I was planning to get there, yada, yada, yada. And I never really stopped to think about it at that point, having a really decisive place. But I didn't want to say, I don't know where I'm going, I just want to go east or whatever, because I didn't want to sound cheesy, or I didn't want to sound like something was being made up or whatever. The first thing that occurred to me was, I have one friend all the way in Newfoundland. So I told him, I was like, oh, I'm out to go see someone in Newfoundland. And he's like, wow, you're pretty far from there. I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm like not really in the position to be traveling in luxury, so I'm kind of making this trip this way because I really want to be there or whatnot. And he said, okay, well, so sure enough, he took me to Winnipeg, and he saw how lacking I was in resources and stuff. And so he's like, I'm gonna do you a solid. He actually took me to his house and gave me a warm place to sleep, and he was really gracious. He was really, really kind. God bless him for what he was able to do for me, just as everyone else did help me out for sure. I get up the next morning, he says, come with me, and he walks me over to a Greyhound station. We go to the clerk's desk, and he buys, without me knowing, he ended up buying me a ticket to downtown Toronto. It was so cool. I ended up going to Toronto. I hadn't been to Toronto since since leaving there towards the end of 2005 when my father moved us from there to Alberta. And so like it was really cool to see the city again. I'm lying. I had been there previously a couple times, but I never really stopped to enjoy the city as much as, because at that point I was there, like I had nothing really to do, so like I was able to like walk the city a little bit and like see it again and like breathe it in without any rush of like having to do something or be somewhere. So, I was able to breathe it in again. But then that's kind of where things started, taking a bit of a hairy bump there. Once I got back on the road, being in Toronto, it became very difficult. Because people in Ontario aren't really trusting of people in the middle of the street trying to get picked up, and rightfully so. I totally get it. But also hitchhiking is illegal on the freeways of Ontario. It's very illegal. Like if you wanted to get picked up, you wait on the exits of the freeway where it's literally impossible for people to stop. I found out the hard way that it was not going to be easy at all. So what I ended up doing is I ended up buying a ticket for the Go buses. Those of you in Ontario will know exactly what that is. It's basically a long distance express bus that takes you from city to city. So I ended up taking a Go bus to Kingston. Oh, buddy, I spent 2 full days just being at the exit of the freeway, countless hours just trying to get picked up and no one would stop. It took 2 full days of like finally someone like stopped, and during nighttime, I would go to this truck stop that I found where there was a cafe and a little motel for, traveling truck drivers and stuff. And I didn't even have enough money for the motel. I ended up like sleeping in the driver's lounge. Just put 3 chairs together, and that would be my bed. Or sometimes I would take when that became too uncomfortable, I'd actually sit on a chair and lean it up against the wall. Trying not to fall, and lean my head up against the wall and try to sleep that way. And did not sleep much at all. And so finally, like I said, 2 days later, it was finally someone picked me up, but didn't take me far. Maybe it took me a few kilometers, and then, dropped me off again. It's just locals, doing me a solid. And basically, like 4 car rides later, I made it to a city called Brockville, which is not far at all. It's so crazy how little I was traveling, and it was already nighttime. It was cold. I was standing at the exit of the freeway. There was ice chill in the air for sure. Like my skin was starting to burn a little bit. Basically at Brockville, I was at the very edge of the city, right at the entrance of the exit of the highway. So, there was, the first thing you saw was a Timmy's, a McDonald's, some hotels here and there. And so the first one was a Days Inn, where I would periodically go inside to warm up or whatever. And then obviously receptionist felt uncomfortable with me being there or whatever. So I would only stay in for half an hour, just enough to warm up and then go back out. And then a block down, I could see a Timmy's and stuff. So I would go there, I would go buy a sandwich or something, go buy coffee, just try and stay warm, and then go back out and keep going. And it's getting pretty close to 9 o'clock or some odd shit like that. I looked at the clock and saw it was 9:30 or so. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go to Tim's. I'm gonna buy myself a coffee. I'm gonna come back out, do this in probably another 2 hours, probably another 2.5 hours, and then if nothing pops up, then I'll go crash at the lobby of the Days Inn. If they kick me out, then well, at least I'll try. Whatever. And so I go into the Timmy's. If anybody doesn't know, Timmy's is, everybody should know what a Timmy's is. Fuck this shit. I ended up going into Timmy's, and this guy that's in line with me is looking at me. I'm like, dude, what's this guy's deal? And he goes, you're the guy standing outside, right? Trying to get picked up. I'm like, yeah. He's like, where are you trying to go? And I told him I was going to Newfoundland. And he's like, oh shit, no way. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I live in Montreal, but I'm driving home tonight to Montreal, Montreal, Quebec. I'm driving home tonight. If you want to come with me, I can drive you to Quebec. And so, sure enough, he ends up driving me to Quebec, and his name is Mark Benoit. He ended up letting me stay at his place, let me crash on his couch, hooked me up real nice, let me take a real warm shower, which which admittingly had been a couple days since I had one. So we go to his house, and he's telling me, he's like, well, since you're going to Newfoundland, to St. John, Newfoundland, you should probably come with me in the morning. I have to actually go drop off a trailer, which is what he did for work. I have to go drop off a $100,000 RV to St. John, which is what I do for work. He told me, I'm like, no way, you're going there? He's like, yeah, the only thing you have to do is pay your own ticket for the ferry. But besides that, yeah, man, you're welcome to join me. I'm headed there in the morning. He's like, oh, absolutely, absolutely. So sure enough, in the morning I get up and we hop in the car and we hit the road. Where it gets really interesting, once we hit the province of New Brunswick, and we were actually not that far from heading into Nova Scotia. We were on the highway just outside of a little town called Bouctouche, which now some of my greatest friends in the world, like Denis and Rock, are from. Hopefully, you guys will meet those guys soon. So we're just outside of Bouctouche, and poor Mark ended up running out of cooling fluid, and his truck was it was basically a heavy duty truck with a dual spare tank diesel truck, carrying a $100,000 RV, and basically got Buddy's motor lit up on fire, and basically by the time we could do anything about it, the flame had gotten probably 15 feet tall, and for a guy who's never been through that before, it was scary. I was like, he looks at me and he goes, buddy, we should probably start running at this point. So we're running away from it, and one really funny thing that happened was I was running and I heard this freaking loud fucking pop, but it sounded like like three had gone off all at once, but it's like it was so consecutive that it was just like it just sounded like one big one, like boom, boom, boom. And so I dove, I took a nosedive into the snowbank that was beside the road there. And Mark is like, buddy, what are you doing? Get up, those were just the tires. The tires had gone. And so I'm running away, and Denis, who happened to be driving by, my now good friend Denis, was driving by, and he picked me up, and I looked at Mark, and he said he was gonna end up having to drive back to Quebec there to fix up the situation with the RV and his truck and all this stuff, and I said goodbye to him, and I thanked him for taking me thus far, and I left with Denis, and Denis, the same deal. He took me home with him. I don't know what the hell it is about my face, but for some reason people seem to trust me. I'm thankful for it, but at the same time, I don't know how the fuck that is. At that point, I must have been really, I looked in the mirror that night, and I looked like a fucking terrorist, man. My face was scruffy, my eyes were baggy. I was wearing a toque because it was cold, obviously, but I took off my toque, and my hair was just a mess. My breath stank. My face was dirty, and it was just, it was a matter of, and I was covered in exhaust smoke and all this stuff. And I'm really grateful that people were able to trust me that quick and into helping me. And so the next day, I woke up and he took me to his church. Turns out he goes to church, and I talked to his pastor, Troy. Troy wanted to help out, but more so than anything, he wanted me to be more better equipped if I was going to end up continuing my journey. So he suggested that I stay in town and make some money, clean up, settle down for a few days, get some money, and then clean up a bit, and then continue on with my journey. He was actually like very willing to give me the money for the ferry and help me get all the way to St. John's. And telling him whatever, he was asking me what kind of work experience I did, and I was like, well, I didn't want to make things too complicated. I didn't want to say, oh, get me a gig at a bar somewhere, I'll play guitar for a couple days or whatever. I didn't want to say, like I'm an athlete or anything like that. I didn't want to, I didn't want to overcomplicate things. I was just like, what, I did construction for a long time. If you know anybody who's looking for an assistant or need some carpentry work or some interior work or anything like that, I'm more than happy to do it for a few bucks. And so sure enough, he knew my buddy Bert LeBlanc. He first off ended up dropping me, got Denis to drop me off at a homeless shelter that was in the middle of the city of Moncton, and that was a really humbling experience. I'll try to elaborate that on a future podcast, but it's. I'm really grateful that happened. I got to see all sorts of shit, and to have never spent a night at a homeless shelter before, and to have done so that night. I spent everything from that morning all the way to the next morning, which to the morning in which I had to go meet up with Bert. I had to spend all day at the homeless shelter, and it was such a, I'll say it like this, it was such a good experience. I'm glad I did it. It's not for everybody, but I'm glad I did it, And so the next day I met Bert, and it was just like, I ended up being his roommate. I ended up being his apprentice and his more than anything, a very close friend with him. I ended up sharing so many experiences with him. I ended up staying in Moncton for 2 months. Eventually I left Moncton and I didn't make it to Newfoundland. I ended up coming home to Vancouver. I had some commitments I had to take care of, but the 2 months that I was in Moncton, I got to meet so many great people. I can't even begin to name them all because it'll never end. And but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I was able to see what I saw and meet who I met and learn the things that I did. In this particular episode, I just want to, I would like you guys to meet Bert and hear what his take on some of that stuff was, and hopefully you guys get something out of it and can hear it through a different perspective, what my journey must have been like from somebody else's view. We're sitting here with Mr. Bert LeBlanc, a buddy of mine from Moncton, New Brunswick. Basically, I was in need of a place to go crash, and desperately needed some money just to get anywhere else. And after getting rescued, so to speak, from an engulfed in flame truck, someone pulled me, took me into their house and, showered me up, took me into a homeless shelter where I spent a night. That was fun, pretty interesting. And then later on, a priest, a pastor, sorry, Troy, what's Troy's last name? Matchett, from Bucktouche, kind of hooked me up with Bert, and luckily I'm not that useless at using power tools. Was able to give me work for a few days, and basically Bert was gracious enough to let me stay at his place for a couple months just before I headed back to Vancouver. So this is Bert, guys.
Hey guys, how are you doing? When John came into my life, didn't need any help actually, just needed a helping hand, and I was blessed enough to be able to do it for him, and I know that he would do it for anybody else that he meets. So for the 2 months that he worked with me, I gave him a job, and you know what? We all need a helping hand once in a while, including myself. Someday it's coming, I'm sure. And John and I have become great friends, and it's amazing to know that he's now married and expecting a child. That's awesome.
Quite a drastic difference, eh?
2 years, yeah, I'd say that's pretty drastic, yeah, pretty impressive.
What would you say was the like how drastic of a person in your eyes, anyways, do you see me as?
Well, one thing that I realized very quickly is that you were very smart and wise for your age. You would have been, what, 23 years old back then? 24?
24, yeah.
24 years old, yeah. And after our first conversation when we met for breakfast, I realized that you were very wise beyond your years, and I was very impressed by that. So it was not a long stretch to have you stay with me, even though I did tell you that you could slit my throat if you wanted to. And when John came in to my house, he said, you know, the knives are there, the keys are there. If you slice my throat, make sure you make it farther. And it was, of course, it was a joke, because I already knew I could have that sense of humor with him. So it was fantastic. You know, it was a great experience. Really, it was a blessing. Truly.
What was that moment? I wonder what it must have been like to see me, because I know. I'll tell you this little bit is when I went in to meet Troy for the first time, someone told him that there was some guy hitchhiking in the middle of the road and got picked up by some truck driver, and their engine ended up exploding, yada yada yada, and all this stuff. And I went into their church. And Troy just looked at me and kind of scratched his chin a little bit, and literally without thinking about it twice, he just looked at me and with a straight face said, "Holy hell! I really did not expect you to look like that." So it tells you something right there. So I'm curious to hear what exactly went through your mind when you first saw me.
Well, I got a phone call from Troy on a Friday night. You had just gotten picked up by Denis, one of our great guys from church, and Troy said this guy might need a place to stay for a couple of days, and he says, he gave me your cell number, texted you, and we met up for breakfast the next morning, and I think instantly I understood that you were very wise, like I say, beyond your years. Look-wise, I had no expectations, so it was not something that maybe in the back of my mind, maybe rougher than you were, but you were well refined, surprisingly good looking, but don't let that go to your head. And so no, and like I say, I think I was instantly, we had a connection instantly, I felt.
That's funny you say that. I remember when I was passing through Kingston, Ontario. I stopped at a truck rest stop, and I went into the little malt shop there. And the server went up to me and she literally just looked at me and said, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. You're like the perfect little pool boy. Go to Miami or something." I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, she was right. Actually, I think you would be the perfect cabana boy. Guaranteed.
Cleaning a pool or a duck somewhere. So tell me exactly how and why, what prompted you to take me in as in depth as you did, because you could have just let me stay at the shelter and then just pick me up for work or whatever, but you didn't. I'm very, to my utmost surprise, you let me crash with you, and we ended up building this incredible bond. Absolutely. So why exactly did you do it initially?
It's one thing that Jesus teaches in the Bible. I'm born again Christian, and I want to do what Jesus taught me to do. And even though this was very easy with you, and it was the right thing to do, I had the space, I had the means to be able to support you in giving you work, and not support you, but I think where you were, you needed a helping hand, and I think God put me in the way to provide that helping hand for you to get you where you are today. And I understood that it could be me tomorrow that needs that helping hand. And it was really done out of wanting to serve God more than just say, look, I'm a good person. It meant nothing on that front. And seriously, I was really blessed to have the opportunity. I felt I was a guy that was blessed more than you were. I don't know if you were or not, but I did. The opportunity was presented, and it was not always easy. There was a couple of moments where we had disagreements.
Sure, for sure.
But besides that, and I mean, I charged you rent at one point because and because if I give you something without having anything in return, then it's got no value.
For sure.
So at least you had a value. You were making money now, and you were paying money, and I think you had value. And to me, that's where I think it became a teachable moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you bought the guitar, obviously I had a little but it's funny. I still have the guitar, by the way, and you've never asked me to do anything with or without it. You said you had this thing going on, and I'm like, the guitar's still there for you when you come back. So,
well, I'll let you guys know exactly what he's talking about. I've traveled around a lot, and what ends up happening is when I find a spot that I really, really, really like. For instance, I've been to LA a lot of times. Mainly due to the fact that I have family there, and I've never really left anything behind. Therefore, I can never say, I have something there to go to, something that's mine. Like, I don't have a physical incentive for me to want to go back or anything. And New Brunswick being so far away from me as it is, it's literally the other end of Canada. It's crazy to think that I was over there, but now that there's something that's there, that's really the only reason I bought it is, I have something that's there. I have, now I have the excuse that, well, shit, now I have to go back someday because I got to go get my guitar and stuff, you know what I mean?
And luckily I have something I can move every time I move.
Yeah, oh man. So that's really why I did it. I've done that same thing where I've purchased guitars and left it in places, and I think I have a total of 4 or 5 guitars just spread out in different places. Actually, funny enough, my parents had my favorite guitar, which is my Les Paul. That it was sitting in their basement for the past I think 3.5 years or so in Edmonton, and I just recently I didn't go back, but they came to visit me, and they brought it with them so they can give it to me. I was like, oh shoot, this is awesome, and it just kind of reminds me of certain moments in certain places, and it makes me it makes me grateful for where I am, and at the same time it just, like I said, it gives me an incentive, and it gives me like a physical reason to like want to keep exploring and revisiting places. How did your family take it? Like, what was their reaction to when they heard that you had taken someone in like that?
At first, they were very apprehensive. They were thinking, what are you doing? Why would you do something like that? And they didn't understand, what I believe in my faith is. But the funny thing is, my parents eventually got to know Pablo, which is his handle that my mom gave him by default. We had a Christmas dinner at my brother's place with John, and it was fantastic, and he was accepted as a son, actually, and that was probably one of the things that I appreciated the most, that my parents being so scared at first, because it's one thing that people don't, that's why they don't go forward. They're scared to let somebody in, right? I mean, and who knows, he could have been an axe-wielding, murdering serial killer, but on the other side, he could have been a loving son, that needed a helping hand. So you can't, I guess the end of the day, it's better to die trying than to live and not help.
So how are they now? How?
They ask about you actually right now. They ask, like, how is he? You know, I said we had dinner with Pablo. I had dinner with Pablo last night, and my mom and my dad asked about you, and so yeah, you became part of the family.
Do they ever tell you, like, are you gonna ever take another one in?
I think they already know not to ask many questions about me. I'm a strange cat to begin with. So, but no, I would. You know what? I want to live what Jesus says. Like when Jesus says in the Bible, you never know, once you've entertained people, you might have been entertaining angels, or you've been, you know, what you do unto somebody else, you're doing it unto me.
Totally.
So that being said, it's like, you know, you can tell when some people are, it's tough when you follow that line. But no, it's a great experience because I still contact you every time I come out here. So and I still want to be in touch with you, and I want to see your child grow and your marriage grow, and you're an amazing guy. I love it.
Appreciate it, man. No, it's for sure. It's you never know where you're gonna create a bond, and you know that's why I'm always encouraging people to go explore the world. It's a tiny place, but at the same time, it can be a very, very long place. You know, and you never know where you're gonna find your next, you know, good friend. And I was definitely grateful. You know, I was going to go to St. John, Newfoundland. Ended up never making it.
It'll come.
But it was, you know what? I landed at the place where I guess I was meant to be, and I was very grateful that I made it to Moncton. I have so many memories there, so many great friends. You know, hopefully in this podcast I'm able to sit down with a lot of them and chat about, you know, their life and just see what they're all about. Yeah, I don't know. Well, Bert actually has his own construction company, and I don't know, so in a lot of my spiels, so to speak, I talk a lot about, you know, parallels with our daily routines and how they connect and relate to life. So I don't know, do you think of it that way at all, like when you're working and stuff like that?
No, just work.
It's just your moneymaker.
It's just a moneymaker. I mean, relationships are very important to me. If you asked me if I do something, I've been doing this for 30 years, I'd do something different, I would actually, and I will, because I can, and everybody can. I mean, it's an amazing thing to be able to have that capacity. You know, John and I just had this discussion about him wanting to continue in his MMA fighting with his daughter being born, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, there's a time and a place to do something. Like for MMA, yeah, you do it now, you don't do it when you're 50.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's, yeah, you know what, if anybody out there would be listening right now and you want to pursue something that's age related, do it. And if anybody out there is older than doing something age related and you want to do something that's not, do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Like hitchhiking across Canada.
Oh, hell yeah. I would. You know what? If anybody there has the balls and the audacity to do something like that, by all means. I can't even begin to tell you. Everything from the hardships to the views that you get to see. It's a life-changing experience, and you really do learn so much about yourself, more than you learn about, you know, the people you meet, because I can't even begin to tell you the number of drivers and people that, you know, I had this one cat who I met at a hostel who ended up walking out with me one morning. He walked with me for about 20 kilometers, and then I went in to use the bathroom at a gas station or something like that. By the time I came back out, somebody had picked him up, and, you know, he just left me a note saying, "I left."
Nice.
Yeah, I left.
Go on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It was awesome. Well, I ended up keeping his contact through Facebook, and you know, he's doing great things with his life. He's now in Montreal, I believe, and he was a guy who had came from somewhere in Europe, I believe. I don't know, but he's doing great now, I think. So you never know what all is gonna happen. What kind of people you're going to meet. I mean, you know, one of the things I often think about is, I wonder what it's like to meet me. You know, just because I have a pretty drastic personality, don't you think?
I would say so. I remember when finally you started working, and you know you finally had a place to stay, and we became friends. We did. And I got to understand your personality, and you're pretty intense guy. But like I say, right away, I always knew that you were wise, and that's not something that you give to a young person, especially not your age. And it was very interesting to get your wisdom on certain things that I needed teaching on. Yes, on the female persuasion of some sort, but and so much more.
So, kind of a small interview. Like I said, I didn't exactly get to touch on all the things that I wanted to touch on, really, because we were on limited time. But I promise I'm gonna have another chat with him again. You guys will definitely get in on that. I'm dead certain of it. There's so many more in-depth things to talk about. You know, he's a pretty raw guy. He doesn't shy away from speaking on his beliefs and all that stuff. And I noticed at one point in our conversation, Bert said he didn't help me, but rather he gave me a helping hand. To a degree, I'm not even sure if he said it intentionally or he specified it for a particular reason. I kind of want to throw in my 2 cents as to what I think he meant by that, and maybe chances are I'm way off on it, and he'll correct me once we talk again or whatnot. And I'll be dead honest, I'm not exactly sure when that will be, because he lives all the way in New Brunswick, which is literally, like I've been saying this whole time, it's literally the other point of Canada. When we're talking about a helping hand, like he said, I don't consider it to be the same thing as helping somebody. Not in a broad sense anyways. Because to me, there's taking somebody somewhere, and then there's, you know, giving them a boost to help them get to the next place, you know, to their next step. When you think about it like a workout, which is, I guess, is the most obvious one. You know, a spotter, when you think about a bench press or a shoulder press, or even, you know, being at the squat rack, a spotter only has 2 very important jobs. It's to make sure that heavy ass weight doesn't drop on your face or your neck or your back and end up either paralyzing or killing you or disfiguring your face permanently. You know, he's there for your safety, first and foremost. And secondly, a lot of spotters get the other one wrong. He's not, you know, when you're on your last couple, you know, reps and your last set, when you're really fatigued and you're really struggling to get that weight up, a lot of dudes who don't know how to do it, they'll literally grab the bar itself and they'll lift it up for you just so you can say you did the full set or the full rep or whatnot. But that's not what the spotter's job is. The spotter's job is literally to put his hand underneath the bar and just barely, obviously he's going to touch the bar, but he's barely supposed to put any effort in. He's really just supposed to put in those last couple fibers of movement, those last couple, you know, little tickles of effort, you know, that lacking little bit of energy that you don't have to complete it. He's basically there to keep the bar moving, not to take over the weight and do it for you. No, he's there to keep your body moving, you know, to keep your arms moving so that you can complete the set. But rather they're supposed to be there to push you along, you know, not do it for you, but give you that extra little push that you need to make it to the end. And that's a spotter's job. And I think that's a really good illustration of what a helping hand is, you know. When you're thinking about traveling or getting to a certain place, it's not carrying you there. It's really just a small kick to throw you back into walking position. You know, it's really just, if you're pulling something, if you have a load and you're trying to take it somewhere, you know, it's not taking the load off your back. It's really just, you know, when you're losing balance, when you're losing your stance, when you're losing, you know, your mobility, it's basically, you know, think about it, someone walking behind you, and all of a sudden you're losing your posture or whatever, and someone goes and kicks you in the back of your leg just so, you know, you go back into a maneuverable stance, and then you're able to carry the load the rest of the way there. You know, that's what it is. You know, you're not contemplating letting the thing go, because it's not about giving you an excuse to cut the journey short. It's not a cutting corner. It's a matter of, like, if you're hanging at the edge of a cliff, he's not pulling you up. He's just giving you his hand so you have something to grab onto. Meanwhile, you're still pulling your own body weight up. That's all it is. You know, he's giving you a rope. He's giving you something to grab onto so that you can finish the journey on yourself. I think that is far more helpful to a journey than to have somebody complete the journey for you, because then you haven't lived the journey. You haven't lived the hardship. You didn't complete the race. You had somebody complete it for you. And so a helping hand is not that. It's giving you what you need so that you can do it yourself. Now see, herein lies the issue. A vast majority of the time, and I'm totally guilty of this, we don't always like having a helping hand, or we don't accept it right away. You know, a good argument could be say that that's just us battling with arrogance. Half the time you're kind of embarrassed to get it, and that is partially it. I think we just struggle way too much with our arrogance. I'm completely guilty of that. I can't even begin to tell you how much I battle with my arrogance, and I think that alone is a topic in and of itself. Chances are I'm probably going to be talking a shitload about that as time goes on, but keeping to the topic, you know, it's a matter of, I think that's part of the issue, but also on the other hand, we also try to not resort to that a lot of times. Because we want to explore all other possibilities before having to resort to that, to our last resort, which is the helping hand. And that's good. That's, you know, that definitely builds character. I'm not bashing that. But then the other, one of our many flaws is the following. Again, I'm definitely very guilty of it. I'm totally preaching to myself here. We get scared of receiving it because more often than not, it is very unpleasant. The help, the kick, the little bump that we need is very unpleasant. It's very painful. A lot of times the thing that we need is a bitch slap to the face. A lot of times what we need is a kick in the ass, a good, you know, we need to get popped in the mouth before we learn, you know, how to conduct ourselves, how to finish the journey, how to, you know, we need to be whipped into shape, you know. The little kick is really just the ass kicking of our life. And you know, we're scared of that. We're constantly scared of having that, even though it's the one thing we need to finish the race sometimes. But we're too scared to undertake the rough side. You know, we're too scared to feel the point of the sharp blade that kick in the ass sometimes. You know, sometimes we're willing to ignore the possibilities, and, you know, we're willing to stray from completing the task in order to avoid the rustic side of what we need. And that definitely, I would definitely say that ties into what I was talking about in the previous podcast about, you know, not thinking about the negative side of things. And it's slightly irrelevant, but at the same time, it's sort of a similar concept. Manning up to the challenge, and a lot of times having that helping hand is a challenge, and it's because of all of this that I've been talking about. But I've been grateful. I've been grateful for the times that it's been given to me, even if I didn't want to, even if it wasn't offered me, or if it wasn't what I initially intended for. But you know, a lot of times it's just fallen on my lap, and I've had no choice but to take it. You can make the argument that it's God helping you out, or life giving you a chance, or it's whatever you want to interpret it as. But a lot of times it just happens to you, and you go with it. And I'm so grateful for the times that I wasn't given a choice. I was just, you know, fucking kicked in the ass, just barely like poked on, you know, kicked back into fighting position, you know, basically what it boils down to. And you know, and these are one of the things you pay forward. You should totally see it as a compliment. At the end of the day, when you look back at it, you should see it as not as a favor done, but you know, someone helping you move forward in life, and it's something you should pay forward. Learn from what people do for you, and do the same, if not similar things, if not the same onto others. What, you know, Bert himself was talking about it, and it's basically a matter of seeing it as a token, seeing it as a stepping stone. You know, you should totally strive to be a stepping stone for others when they need it. When they don't need it, by all means, let the world have its own journey. You have your own. Everybody is on their own on this journey. But you know, there's times when you stumble across somebody, and I'm not talking about enabling somebody's bad behavior by pulling them out of an unnecessary rut. That totally ties into a lot of situations, and I'm not going to go into that. I mean, I'm sure the minute I said that, there was a lot of situations that I'm sure you thought I was referring to. All sorts of different things, whether it's lending people money, feeding the homeless, etc., etc. You know, the list goes on. And I'm not going to get into that, because that's not what this is about. But what this is about is giving somebody a quick gasp of oxygen when they truly, truly need it. It's not for you to show them that you're just a go-to lifeline. You're not an easy access, you know, an easy source of getting out of. You're not a get out of jail for free card. You're a quick shoulder to lean on for when somebody is losing grip on their tribulation, straying away from the gold when they're facing trials. And that's all it is. I'm completely grateful for everybody who helped me out on my trip. That was years ago, but you know, I can't. The things that people did for me, I will never forget it. Mark Benoit, Denis Daigle, Bert LeBlanc, Troy Matchett, Rock, his wife Jeanette, my other friend Jeanette, the other, you know, all the friends of mine that taught me so much and allowed me to share experiences with them that year, for the 2 months that I was there. I can't even begin to tell you how much I love all of them. I love Moncton. I love the province of New Brunswick. It's, you know, honestly, to me, and I know I'm gonna get bashed by all my fellow British Columbians, and you know, all my people at my hometown of Toronto and Ontario and even Quebec. I can only describe New Brunswick as the most Canadian place I know. You know, when I think of a Canadian and what the culture is supposed to be about, so un-Americanized, but just still first world, but very, you know, totally its own thing. That's what, you know, New Brunswick in a nutshell. And if you ever get a chance to travel through there, or to even to just go visit, I absolutely recommend it. And if you at no point had the intention or didn't even know what the fuck a New Brunswick was, it's not a Brunswick that's new, I'll tell you that. It's a great place. You should totally look into it. Anyways, I babbled on way too much. Fucking the chat with Bert was supposed to be the focus point, and if nothing else, you should have tuned into that. So I'm peacing the fuck out of here.